for posterity. Oh, recording in progress. Yes. Oh, thank you, Phil. So I have five bits of news. Hopefully, it will be considered good, perhaps hopeful. We'll see. And I'll start with saying one bit of hope is that ASC is enjoying many years in existence. I'm not quite sure how many, but I know it's up 30. Yeah, okay, that's what I said. I was going to say that 30 and a half. Okay. Which is fabulous, because many professional associations, of course, are hitting the kind of Putnam bowling alone era where it's very difficult to get people to join, to stay around, to be involved and engaged. And I think it's fabulous that this community is that kind of community that is involved and engaged. So that's fantastic. And of course, Phil stepping up to be president is a big deal. So thank you very, very much. And that gives us a reason to hope. So I had five things, one down. The reason why the reason why Phil said he liked this talk so much, I guess he said, "Oh, I really like that." I said, "Okay, all right, yeah." He said, "Yeah, well, maybe kind of hopeful," but he said it was short. So, you can hold on to that too. So look, I am going to just focus on a few things, and I guess these are moments I've had probably more in the second half of 2024 that do make me hopeful for 2025 and for things that might happen in the future. So I just want to kind of play them out for you, see what you think. You see if you think some of these things will maybe cheer you up a little bit if you're not feeling great at the end of 2024. So first thing I want to talk about is the kind of misdisinformation slash AI nexus. Okay, that big, yeah, exactly. That big morass of kind of ideas, thoughts people have in the bath, other things in that area. And this year, something happened. We've all kind of been arguing about this over the last couple of years, what it means for an area, what it means for the science sector. And this year, finally, something kind of coalesced, and I think that's a good sign. So, in mid-November, the chief scientist of Australia, Kathy Foley, with the Australian Science Media Centre, convened a bit of a conversation. I think it's going to be a bit of a game changer. So, about 25 people came together. These are people that usually don't come together. So these are people from Digi, sort of, industry advocates. There were folks from the media, folks from Australian, the Commonwealth government, a few local governments were there, and a lot of researchers. And that was really the first time in the last couple of years that I've seen this. And I know we had a bill going in front of Parliament that has been argued about, and it's not like I'm not unaware of what's going on there. But what I would like to draw your attention to is that the Australian government has done quite a bit of work. The Commonwealth government has done quite a bit of work to come up with like a bit of a misinformation framework. And you can find it online, just Google it. And they've got five pillars that they've worked on around this misinformation framework. I don't know why we need pillars. A lot of pillars going on in the policy world, but I guess there's five pillars for ASC. Oh, excellent. And we look forward. Anyway, so they got this five-pillar plan to combat misinformation. And, we spend a lot of time as academics picking apart the kind of things that have five pillars and say, oh, well, why didn't you have six or two and a half, or those are the wrong ones, or wrong color, or whatever. But to be honest with you, I thought an extraordinary amount of good work went into this particular piece of work. And I could see that there were a number of policymakers feeling very frustrated about how the conversation was going. And they had a realization that they hadn't actually engaged or maybe had consultation with everybody that they could have. And they were kind of open and honest about that. And at this meeting with the chief scientist, that was acknowledged and said, what does this community think? And people said really interesting things to say. And it's the first time that they've said them in the same room together since this became an issue. And I thought, okay, no, all of a sudden this became something that was going to be a Thursday afternoon eye roll to something that was actually very, very interesting. And it was that coalescing of people coming together. Now, I think that's a good sign of change, perhaps, and a sign that consultation can happen, and that the kind of truisms that maybe we've pushed out a little bit too readily about misinformation and disinformation can be studies a little bit harder, pushed on a little bit harder. In our community, one of the things that's frequently overlooked is exactly what the harms are of misinformation and disinformation. And there are some serious harms. But I think there's a lot of complaint and a lot of concern And occasionally we don't identify those harms. And so this group was saying, hey, wait a minute, hold on a second. In the science space, when there's a bit of misinformation, what's the harm? Now, in the COVID context, we could identify what those harms were and be kind of clear about that. In other areas, we're not so clear. And so that was one of the calls that kind of came out of that meeting was exactly what are the harms of mis and disinformation in science and science communication. So I thought that was pretty hopeful. See, it's low end hopeful, but I mean, it's been the low end kind of year. Um, so the other thing I want to do is sort of setting aside this discussion about mis and disinformation, of course, has been a lot of quite a few developments in the AI space. Oh, thank you. And and of course, second half of the year, Sakana AI came out with the announcement that they can produce a scientific paper for about $15. They can also spruik the AI they spruik the AI scientist program they have. That can also come up with hypotheses, test results, um, write the paper, and review it, change it up, and get it ready to go out for publication. You could probably publish it too. I mean, that can't be that hard. Um, okay, so we laugh about this, and yet we also know, and this was one of the discussions we had at the talk with the chief scientist. We also know that this is already happening, and an amazing amount of scientific research is being published, and it's how should you say the conditions of its production are not exactly clear, and some of this has been called fraudulent science. Others have said, well, no, it's not. So there's going to be an ongoing debate about that. And at the meeting with the chief scientist, Karen Verspoor from RMIT, another person whose work I just became familiar with this year, Google her. She is really, really interesting on this. Gave a great talk about how unchallenging it is to generate fake papers or portions of fake papers, and the kind of nudging that this is doing to the scientific publishing system, and of course the academic system, and also the private research from private research institutes. So this is something we're really going to have to care about and think about. And so I was heartened, though, that the chief scientist was open to that, inviting conversation and trying to identify what the harm is in that specific instance. Now, sitting alongside the mis and disinformation and the worry about fraud are all the things around AI. And what's really interesting too this year is I really saw folks in our field, in science communication researchers, sort of step up and start doing a little bit more research in this area because we don't have a huge evidence base. And boy, and the evidence base that gets captured within science is not always the evidence base that we would want to talk about science communication or the science society relationship. So I'd like to give a huge congratulations to Michelle Riedlinger at QUT. She's got an ARC funded project on research Gen AI tools and academic publishing policies. And that's going to focus here on Australia, but of course, it's going to hook up to all the stuff's going on EU and in the US and the UK as well. So extremely exciting work. So misinformation is the context to this work, right? But it's not the whole deal. We need to also understand what's going on sort of in the production of scientific both knowledge and communication. Number of other things and other domains are starting to pop up as being really interesting to people in the misinformation space. Again, recognizing what the harms are. So biosecurity, one of those contexts. We're at CPAS here at the ANU. We're going to have a postdoc starting early in the year looking at sort of the biosecurity space and the information harms that are done there, which is quite interesting. So wouldn't it be great? See, it's the hopeful bit. Wouldn't it be great to have an ASC group that brought folks together, she says, looking meaningfully over at Phil Dooley, who are researching and practicing in this domain? A job for you in 2025. What do you think, Phil? That'd be great. So another issue, though, that I think we could pick up next year, probably should have picked up before now, is also the impact of misinformation on scientists, researchers themselves. So this is something that I've had a bee in my bonnet about since COVID, because one of the things, of course, that happened was that as misinformation came out into the world, a number of people came forward to debunk it, to offer alternative explanations or interpretations or hypotheses. And what happened to those people? Well, for a large part, they were savaged. Okay. I mean, really bad. And, um, really lucky tonight we have Clark Miller from Arizona State with us from the US. And he's visiting us talking about some work that they're doing at Arizona State. But here in Australia, it was pretty mean, Clark. I imagine in the US, you could tell us some interesting examples of things that happen. And while you might say if certain scientists are public figures, chief medical officers, et cetera, they have a team around them that kind of helps them through that kind of scenario. But for early career researchers, this was pretty bad. And so there's now emerging evidence of people leaving research, leaving the academy, leaving public service, because they were basically savaged for having what I would say are pretty reasonable conversations and the kind of conversations in science communication we want to have more of. Because people disagreeing respectfully in public is exactly the way that we should be thinking about science communication. And yet, when they tried to do this, not only they shut down, but they were actually brutalized. People that were death threats. I mean, just outrageous. So I think in science communication, though, we need to do a little soul searching because we've been, for, the last 20, 30 years, being quite vocal about get out there, communicate your research. It'll be good for you. It'll be good for your career. Rah, rah, go, go, go. And then as soon as they get savaged, where were we? Right? Where's the communication aftercare? Because I'm not sure people got a lot of that. And I think that is a fabulous opportunity for this community to kind of step up, step forward, and also have a conversation about whose responsibility it is to protect, enable, and restore some of the careers and abilities of researchers to speak out in an open and honest way. And that's serious business, okay? Because if we're still going to cling to the idea that we can have science in democracy, we're going to need more of these hard conversations, not fewer. And so somebody's got to be willing to be a little bit the bouncer for those conversations. And that could be us. So that's another idea. I mean, Phil, I'm just giving you a sort of a wish list of things that you could do. Now, that's the second thing I wanted to sort of talk about, that whole morass of AI and misinformation. But I do see glimmers of some really interesting and fresh conversations we can have. So another interesting conversation happening second half of this year was at the AMOS conference. So this is the Association for Interdisciplinary Meta Research and Open Science. Whoa. Doesn't that sound awesome? Okay, well, they sometimes call it meta science or the science of science. It's a great conference, really interesting, eclectic group of people. And for that conference, one of the keynotes who came out from the UK was James Wilsden. Some of you will know him. And he gave this really quick, sharp image of what's kind of happening in the policy space in the rest of the world in relation to science. And he was talking about a willingness for scientific systems to be scrutinized and experimented with. So the examples he gives are, so the UKRI, that's the overarching organization for all the research institutions in the UK. They've established a meta science unit. They are just about ready to fund 23 projects around £5 million that are experimenting with their research funding system. So here in Australia, there's been some really interesting conversations. Folks, Adrian Barnett, for example, up in Queensland, did some really interesting work some years ago where he sort of made the case that it's probably better for those of us who go for ARC grants to go into a lottery than to go through the kind of rigmarole we do with kind of reviewing each other's grants. He said it would actually be more productive. People would they'd be able to hand out more money, and it'd probably be even maybe a little bit more equitable. So these are the kind of experiments that the people have been talking about. Well, so UKRI are going to fund 23 of these in their research system over the next year. Interestingly, he was also pointing out that the EU framework funding, we're heading into the framework 10 now in the EU for 2028, 200 billion, and their tagline is align, act, and accelerate. And what's most interesting to be for me, the finish of the tagline is transformational science will not be fostered by conventional procedures. I mean, that's a pretty big statement from an EU framework. It's sort of saying business as usual is not going to be tolerated, right? And that one of their streams of activity in that is also going to be meta science research. So, and of course, traditionally, part of meta science research is how you engage or co-create or communicate or work with the people who might one day have bear or enjoy the impact of your work. And so this is a really, really interesting funding situation where we're seeing actual money going into experimental systems. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen in Australia. I'm not, but I do think that we can join in some of that work, and that's quite exciting, and also learn from some of the experiments that they're doing. Also, the International Science Council, right? They have been incredibly vocal over the last year or two that things are broken. In Western countries, at least, things are pretty broken. And it's time to do things differently. So I just want to give a quick shout out to my colleague Sujatha Raman, who's the UNESCO Chair of Science for Science Communication and Public Good, and also Jenny Metcalf, who responded to sort of from the Science Communication Committee to the ISC's worry that things were broken and pointing out how you could fix them by kind of looking at the context in which we live, not just the messages that we kind of spew out. And so they wrote a wonderful paper called The Contextualization Deficit, and I encourage you to add it to your holiday reading. So lots to fix, but I think a lot of interest coming in about how to fix it. And then, just to kind of make my case that this is actually a global phenomena that people are interested in, there are some really cashed up private companies, places like Arcadia, the Altus Institute. That's basically private equity now looking at science and the science system, right? So how can, because they're very interested, of course, in producing knowledge efficiently, right? And with the best people. So they're having a look too. And so they're spending a lot of money on this. What's the optimization of our science system? And let's see who gets there first, right? So, I mean, I think this is kind of James kind of opened up, at least to me, a kind of a bracing vision of a future that has kind of arrived, at least overseas, where to counteract worries of science getting small, right? We talk about that. Oh, we were very worried last year because science was getting too small, right? The ideas were too small. There weren't where did all the big ideas go? There was a wonderful paper in Nature where they were asking sort of where did all the big ideas go? It's just science has become this tiny little puzzle solving thing. And it's like, really? Yeah, wasn't it always thus? But never mind. There was a worry about that. And this, though, kind of is a response to that, to say, well, actually, it may not be about slowing down or getting small. It might be about doing things differently. So I found that quite an interesting conversation, something that I think we might get involved in. And of course, one of the things that's come out of all of these, so EU in their call, UKRI, it's on their website, and even the Altus Institute had a very interesting little tagline. They've all noticed that one of the things that does seem to make science special are the people that go into it, and that actually you have to have a steady stream of early career talent. And what's the most important thing about that talent? That they went to flashy universities? No, that they actually have a diversity of thinking and come from a diverse arena of places. That's the most important thing. So even the Altus Institute, venture capital, even recognizes that we need more diversity in the system, and that's actually what's going to keep the system holding together. So that's a very interesting bit of thinking that maybe we should do in relation to science communication. Like, how would we apply that to our own field? And here I'd just like to give a quick shout out to Alice Motion at the University of Sydney, who does a lot of work in this area. It has really encouraged a variety of people to come into science communication to feel welcome at the ASC, which I think is fantastic. And so I think this is something that we can maybe not work alongside Altus, but maybe we can find our own way forward for thinking about the diversity of people and talent that comes into science communication. So heady stuff. So that's my third. Take them off. Okay. Fourth. So I've been lucky enough to have a conversation with colleagues at the Australian Academy of Science over this year. They're preparing their decadal plan for 2035. Science in Australia 2035. What should it look like? Number of streams of work, and I'm not going to be a shill for the Australian Academy of Science, but I am very, very interested in these conversations. And one of them has gone surprised me, and I actually put my hand up to join more. I want more. Um, and that was about the demography of science. What is happening to the demographics of science? What's it going to look like in 2035? Okay, I mean, we're in 2025. It's only 10 years away, right? So how different can it be? Well, actually, let's have a little bit of a discussion about that because one thing we know about Australian science is it's incredibly international, okay, more than other science systems because um, for various variety of reasons I won't go into, but international by background. And yet, right now, at this precise moment, we are having a national conversation about immigration. Now, it's very interesting. The other sort of sub-trend to this internationalization of Australian science is that over the last 30 years, there's been an increase in the number of people who don't just immigrate here to, like I did, to take up a job in the higher education system, but actually people who immigrate here maybe while they're in high school or in their junior years of schooling, are educated up through the Australian system, and then take on a position in higher education. Very different than other places. My question to us is that going to continue? And if it doesn't, what does that actually mean for the demographics of Australian science in about 10 years' time? So, you know, I think it's a concerning question, and I know it's a political question, but I think it's something that we should probably all have our eyes on. The other thing that came out of this demographic um, sort of deep dive was that who are going to be the early career researchers in 2035? Well, let's see. There's somewhere between year 4 and year 8 right now. And so what do we know about those folks in between year 4 and year 8? Well, we know that in measures across the globe that their average math and science scores are the lowest that have been measured in the last 30 years. We know that they're dropping out of math and science even at a faster rate. It's just kind of sort of it's just the bottom's dropped out. So that's interesting. And are we prepared to have a conversation without moral panic, where we're blaming another opportunity to blame teachers for everything that goes wrong? Are we ready to have a different kind of conversation about our science, our research, our innovation system, about those students who are very disaffected for all kinds of reasons, good reasons, and we may try to intervene, great, but we're going to have to figure this out pretty fast because basically the bottom's dropped out. Whoops. Okay. Other issue, of course, is that women are still under 35% of the science workforce. I do want to point this out because about 10 years ago, I thought, oh, we got this sorted. It all looked really good. The number of women coming into science, there was a bit of a peak about 10 years ago. I thought, oh, okay, here it comes, right? Waited for it my whole career, and here it is. And then 5 years ago, a colleague of mine here at the ANU, she's now at Harvard, but she did a Monte Carlo simulation of what it would look like when it would happen that women would be 50-50 across the sciences in Australia, and it would be 21-35. Okay, so we're not talking about 2035. Cataby's talking about 2035. She was talking about 21-35. Yeah, so no, that's not in my lifetime, yeah, no, I can't even be in that much denial. So that's a bit of a problem, right? So what direction are we willing to head? I don't think I would have to convince many people in the room that post-COVID, I'm not sure the plight of women has gotten better. And actually, there's all kinds of indicators that it's gotten worse. And so here we are in science communication. Are we talking about this? And I'm not saying we need more women in science in a very simple-minded way. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying we've got a problem. The problem has not been, we haven't even sort of chinked away at it. And I certainly thought we had, and that was a little disappointing. But there you go. But I really commend the Academy for looking into something like the demographics of science, not just science priorities, not just the domains of knowledge that we should care about in 2035, but actually the how we do it and the who is going to do it. And so I thought that was actually a really great bit of work that the Academy was doing. It was a little different. It was a little fresh, and that they were willing to do it because it's also can be dangerous, very political. I commend them for that. And I think it's a conversation that we in science communication can join. Okay, so that was number 4. Now, just to recap, so here we are in the future, and as William Gibson would have it, it's unequally distributed. It looks like the EU and the UK will make the experiments, and we'll watch and see what happens and see if we can play too. We'll see how we go. We're willing to sort of look at that question of what our future scientists are going to be like. And, I hope this stuff about misinformation and AI, and then the dreaded word that I wasn't actually going to mention, but I'm going to anyway, this notion that trust is going to continue to drop because of the misinformation and AI. That was another great thing about this meeting with the chief scientist, was that people were finally willing to say, oh, this trust stuff, oh, maybe we should stop talking about that. Not because there's not lots of good things to talk about, but because they've just done it on the wrong terms, right? Trust may not be the terms on which we want to have that conversation. So that was really a really exciting event. So those are the big things. Now, if I haven't given you enough hope yet, okay, here's my suggestion. You change your definition of hope. Okay, so originally hope comes from a Greek word, and yeah, all of you who thought you were going to get away with this without me mentioning some classic reference, see, ha ha ha. So the original root for our word hope is elpis, and the word elpis, when the Greeks used it, they were much more ambivalent about it, and so they sort of would read hope as more like expectation. So think about it this way. You know how we embroider those pillows with, like hope? I don't do this. As a matter of fact, I really dislike that decor a lot. But, it's a hope, nice. Instead, when we have something on our pillows like I expect, I like that better, right? So if you change your frame from hope to I expect, well, then I have some expectations. So I'm going to expect some good things from 2025. Amongst my expectations is that ASC will continue to be the welcoming organization that I joined 20 years ago this year. And so, Phil Dooley, you may have wanted hope, but what you're getting is our expectations for what's going to happen. And I certainly expect that everyone has a peaceful end to 2024. And I expect to see you in 2025. Thank you. Oh, you're coming up quickly.
I'm coming up close.
Okay.
Yeah, as we
Okay.
planned before.
Okay, got it.
She's
I'm
ready
good.
for this.
I'm good.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. And there's so much in there. I'm glad I've recorded it. I can watch it over and over and over and memorize it and delegate it to my council. Look after that, you lot.
Delegation.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Do we have any questions or comments? And while people think up questions, I'm going to ask you to change our basis set, as we say in mathematics. Yes. Rather than trust, what is our basis set? What are the terms? What are we wanting to actually talk about? Is it engagement? Is it?
No, well, I mean, usually when people are complaining about a lack of trust, they're talking about many different things, and some of that is, can we rely upon? I mean, when we say, oh, do you? So trust is an interpersonal category. So I can trust you, but what does it mean? When we ask people, do you trust Do you trust science? It's like, I don't know. Trust science. Like, what would it? I can't even kind of get my head about what that means. Is it about the method? Is it about, nobody knows really what anybody's talking about.
Of course, it's the method, but yeah, okay.
Well, maybe not.
I'm certain, but yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I accept that others might not be.
Well, okay. But then what does it mean to trust a method? I mean, I'm not sure that's the idea here. Actually, what we're saying is we rely upon, or that word expectation again, we expect something from it. These kinds of things. And so it's those kinds of relationships that I think we do need to focus on instead of using a blanket thing, trust. And one of the reasons why I think it's kind of not very smart strategically to talk about trust in science is because if you ask people, do you trust science? And you say, no. Well, I don't know about you guys, but you're thinking about marital counseling. Like once trust is gone in the relationship, right? It's all over. They tell you we won't even take your money anymore, right? You just go get divorced, right? So I don't think we want to be asking people yes or no questions like that. Do
Right.
you trust science?
It's a bit binary. Yep.
Well, it's binary. It's absolute. It's, I think, asking the wrong question. It's getting the relationship wrong. It's a category error. I could go on. So I think we just need to be a lot more specific. So when we have these big social surveys on trust, I think they are measuring things. Maybe not exactly trust, but they might be measuring your ability to rely upon or something like this, something different. But I think it's important to get that right, especially for us in science
And so
communication.
how would you reframe that though?
Well, I just said I would talk about exactly what it is. Are you asking people, do you rely upon science? Do you like science? I think a lot of it's about, do you like it? Will you accept this?
Right.
Right? Because
will you make a decision based on
would you make
evidence?
would you make a decision based on this evidence,
do
or
you want a sort of
something else?
pragmatic
Sure.
sense like that?
I don't think there's much pragmatic about that. I think it's actually being very specific. So I just think trust is a weasel word that we're using to sort of get out of asking precise questions of people and what their interests are in science.
Right.
Yeah.
Questions from the floor or from the chat, Isabella?
And I can't see anything. This light's quite impressive.
Dave.
I've got a lot of friends who are in my 40s and they're particularly good at leaving because there's not a lot of work I felt.
Leaving science.
Yeah.
Okay, Dave Wong has a lot of friends, particularly female, who are leaving science.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of even more business of that balance. So if you look at the 10 or the 10 people,
Yeah.
is that kind of being factored in to people's thoughts in terms of how we might change them?
Yeah, work-life balance, or if we can reframe that slightly, just expectations of what we expect from work and what kind of work it's going to be and what impact it's going to have on us and what difference we can make. Look, I mean, I think there's been a number of studies that does show that, gender matters and that women supposedly really care about certain aspects of their work. And if that's not present, then we're out. I like that idea. We're out. It's like into 2024. Mic drop. I'm out. Yeah. So I think people are taking that into consideration. And when we think of those year 4, year 8, year 10 students and what they want, I know there's a big, there's kind of a cultural meme about millennials and how, they just don't want to work. Well, I'm not sure that is, maybe they just don't want to work in the kind of context that scientific research has been produced in. It hasn't been great in a lot of places. I think we have to face up to that. In a lot of cases, it's not been a great job. Women have been harassed or belittled or had to fight for every bit that they've ever gotten. And so, yeah, that has to be factored in. But so yes, I think it's probably gendered. What we know from year 40, year 8 or 10, I don't know. But I think the worry is it's not just gender; it's everybody saying, "This isn't a system I want to play in anymore." Now that's interesting. Why is that? Yeah, I mean that's interesting. So Dave just was commenting that, it doesn't stop, when you enter science, you get early career researcher, you come out postdoc at the other end. And it's interesting, some work in the US says that the biggest predictor of academic success is mobility. So that's for both genders. So is that the way you want to live is that the way you want to live? And can our planet sustain that? of the kind of science system that we have, where you got to move around every so many years and you've got to hit so many conferences in this particular way or whatever. Can we, is that even sustainable, both personally and for the planet? So I think that's a big set of questions. And that's the kind of stuff, right? If the UKRI and the EU 10th framework start to poke at those particular issues, that's really interesting. And I wish we could do more of it here. Yeah.
Thanks for the talk.
Hi, Indy.
It's really great to hear your reflections in the year.
Yeah.
I'm really curious about the experiments in the science and
Yep.
research system. And so I'm curious, like, if you were to put an experiment into the Australian research system, what would you do?
Oh, great question. Oh, how would I spice it up? Yeah, so let me repeat that question. It's a great question, and I'd really like to throw it out to the room, frankly. But if we were to do some experiments here in Australia on the Australian science system, what would they be? What would we change up? What intervention would we make and then watch and see what happened? No. The funding system, the sort of entrepreneurial system, innovation system. What do you think? Oh, I've got a hand up. Yeah. Stop the lies. Which lies are you thinking of? Yeah.
Service shut. They were cutting down intake, was saying. And out of the graduating year, the only people that made the public service were 2 economists.
That's interesting. So, stop the lies about what science is for and what kind of jobs are available. Yep, yep, yeah, 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 yeah. Some of the jobs are not there. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just propaganda.
So folks that are kind of bolstering, going to, we need more X in science. We need more women in science. We need more people in science. I mean, it's interesting. I take your point, and I think that is also a conversation about what it means to do science or innovation, where it gets done. It doesn't have to be in universities, and that's got to be okay. And all that's a huge conversation. But I think it's a good point. Maybe change up the way in which we talk about science, but also your entry into it and what the job is like. Yeah. It's us. Yep. Trying to reproduce ourselves. Yes. I know. Absolutely take the point. That could be something we change up. Anybody else got any ideas? Anybody online? Changing up the sciences. Look, I think we have to do something about funding, right? I mean, because it's so broken at this point that heck, you try anything. I do like the lottery. I do. I mean, because we all know, those of us who have put in a grant or evaluated other people's grants. The one that really gets me is in Australia. It's the DECRA system. It's an early career research. I have never read a bad DECRA. Like, they're all fundable. I mean, just about, right? I mean, they are so good, because these are people at the top of their game. They've just come out. They've spent a lot of time thinking about this. They're working on from their PhDs to their main, work in life. Here they are, and you read these things, and it almost brings me to tears, because what was the success rate this year? 15%. And that goes to your point. You're bringing a lot of very talented people to a pretty pointy end. So I think if we could intervene there, I don't know if it's funding it more or more equitably, or saying, actually, a DECRA fellowship isn't necessary for the next step of your career. I don't know. We could play around with ways in which we could intervene with that, and see if it wasn't such a pointy end. I see two hands. No. Okay, Clark.
There's a long tradition, especially with some of the Denmark, of
Mhm.
citizen assessment.
Yep.
I you could do something really interesting in a kind of hybrid model in which, so in their model, you put the citizens in charge of asking the question.
Okay.
And they get to convene the experts that they think they need in order to answer the question satisfactorily from their perspectives. I think you could do something interesting with First Nations people as leading the review exercise.
Okay, so just to kind of repeat for people online, if they didn't hear it, this notion that we could, like in Scandinavian countries, especially Denmark, where you have citizen juries or citizen panels that kind of have a look at scientific research proposals and ask the questions of them, we might be able to do something serious, similar here, perhaps even foregrounding our Indigenous colleagues and their abilities to sort of ask questions of this research and the impact it could have. I mean, that'd be a great experience. And we could do it. That's what's so interesting about the Australian, the size makes it a perfect place to experiment with those kinds of consultative methods. Yep.
Two comments online.
Yep.
One, down with the paywall.
Down with a paywall. I love it.
And secondly, I think we need to remember that some future postdocs will be mature age students.
Great point. Absolutely. Well, I hope so, because we can't rely upon the usual year 4 to year 8 because they're not going to be there. But no, I take that point. And how would we make science more friendly for people who come in later? And I have some colleagues and friends who were those people, and the stories they tell curl your toes. But the system is kind of infantilizing, and this is terrible. We can do better than that. We can do better than that. That's a great point. So thank you for that. Okay. Are we headed for 2025 yet?
To assess grants. This whole
that's the idea of the lottery.
Yeah. Them and saying, and people spend all this time writing something to be rated, which just wastes all their time because, only 1 in 6 are getting, so 5 in 6 are spending,
a lot of time.
We're spending 6 times as much on writing the grant.
Yes, the ARC has made an experiment. In its second round, this is the case where they've gone kind of the Marsden, this is the New Zealand route. We can talk about the Marsdens here in a minute. But they've kind of gone that route with, there's an expression of interest thing now where it's only a 2-page sort of expression of interest. So you're lowering the barrier to entry to the granting system. I think that's a great experiment. I haven't seen the results. I don't know if there's been any results from the ARC about what it's meant for the system yet. This second time through, we'll see. I think it's an interesting experiment. They've kind of addressed that.
What it's based on is not trusting scientists. They have to prove that they're worthy. If we just trusted them and gave them
just
money,
trusted scientists. Just give them money. Right. Not on that one.
Exactly.
Long-term.
Yeah.
Funding commitment with very little guidance.
And how'd that go, Clark? And how'd that go in the US when we trusted scientists and gave them long-term funding commitments without a lot hitched to it? Good work. Mixed bag, probably. Yeah.
But I don't know that that's everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Evaluating this as if that's right. Looking at the science of the science system, like, let's have a look. Yeah. And those Marsdens, for those people, that illusion was that this week there was an announcement from New Zealand that their Marsdens were kind of pulling out of social science and the humanities, which is alarming. Sorry? Marsdens are the ARC grants of New Zealand. Yeah. That's the big funding rounds in New Zealand. It funds great work, but they announced this week that they're not going to be funding social science or humanities. Yeah. Yeah, I think.
When we can't even predict the number of doctors, we don't have enough nutritionists. So all these educated people weren't able to do the numbers. And the main game is to keep propping up the real estate prices.
I don't know if our scientists make enough to prop up the real estate prices, but I I do take your point though. What's the main game? Ah. Hmm.
Stay out of main game. And we'll fix and rig this thing until it comes crashing down. And then maybe we'll ask a scientist. Did anyone ask a scientist about AUKUS? Did anyone ask about nuclear energy?
That's been a pretty big discussion about it, actually. Yeah. 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 Look, what I do, I absolutely take your point that thinking about the role of science in a capitalistic system probably doesn't get as much attention as it deserves. There's a fabulous book that I really like, Philip Murawski's Science Mart. It was one of the kind of classics where the kind of positions science in the capitalist system. It's a great read. I recommend it to you. And it kind of runs through some of the arguments you might be interested in. Yep. Yep. Okay. Well, that's a challenge to us, I think, right there. If we're being paid out to stay off the levers of power, I think we should 2025 attack the levers. I like it. No, thank you for that challenge. Take that.
We are getting close to time.
Okay.
One last comment from Nancy Longnecker.
Oh, hi, Nancy.
Over in New Zealand. In
Hi,
my
Nancy.
decades working to increase the proportion of women in science, was I encouraging lambs to the slaughter?
Not if they were working with you, Nancy, but
The system,
Yeah.
science, colonialism, capitalism need to change. So right on your way.
yeah, and I think that's right. No, I don't think, encouraging women to go into science necessarily has to be lambs to the slaughter, but it is incumbent on us who work in the system to make it better for people who come in, right? And I think I wrongly thought 10 years ago that would kind of been resolved. And I think, no, now it's time to really double down. If you're going to invite people in, you got to show them some hospitality. And I don't, and also be serious about, and your point, also be serious about what their future could look like, right? I think that's absolutely right. And I'm not sure we've done a very good job on that. And I think that's a special challenge for science communication because there, in our midst, we do want to encourage people into science, don't we? At some level, that's a very contested it's a difficult, uncomfortable set of questions for us. And so tackling that, I think, is a challenge for us, but one we should take. Yeah.
On that note.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Good to see everybody.
Thank you so much, Joan. ASC.asn for association.au, and that's where you'll find out how to join. And you can give next year's Christmas lecture. And you can be on Joan's committee to revolutionise everything. All right.
Modest. And you'd have to.
Bye bye, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great break and see you in the new year.
Because they won't be able to evaluate.